Ari Rosenbaum here with another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. This week's topic, we're going to talk about favorite topic of mine, misplaced loyalty for 401k plan sponsors. It follows a thing that I've always said about work. I think I mentioned, I think it was a chapter in Full Circle, which is available for paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com. And of course, don't forget to go to that 401ksite.com for information on all our events, live and virtual. We say that because September the 5th, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, live from American Family Field. And of course, let's not forget the virtual event, January 29th, 30th, 2026. If you get the emails, they should be, you'll have the links to sign up for free. And of course, if you go to that 401ksite.com, hopefully by the time this episode drops, you'll see it front and center, or one of the tabs on the website to sign up from there. So let's get to the topic at hand. This is one of my favorite topics, and when I worked at a certain TPA many years ago, I wasn't the favorite employee of the guy running the place. Let's call him Manny. Manny had a way of making himself look competent, not necessarily by doing really any really good work. He would surround himself with incompetent people. It was always the running joke. It always reminds me of the Thornton Mellon line, played by Randy Dangerfield Back to School, where he said, "If you want to look thin, surround yourself with fat people or heavy people." Manny must be competent because he surrounded himself by incompetent people. And, I was a malcontent. I was the turd in the punch bowl, and Manny did not like me because I was threatening. And he had a way of pushing people out that threatened his spot. Reminds me of professional wrestling. You have this spot at the top of the card, and you're going to do anything you can to protect that spot. So he was a guy who kind of lucked into a position with a very excellent salesperson as his partner. He was running the place day to day, and he was always about protecting his spot. There were a couple of really competent guys, and he kind of made sure that they knew that their time wasn't going to be very successful over there, and they moved on. And they created their own TPA, and there were always certain people that if you looked at the people he pushed out, you'd have like an all-star cast of people, setting up TPAs and all that stuff. And I was one of those guys that he just didn't like. And I say in the book, I had issues with like an IRS agent and whatnot. And Manny would go through the mail and intercept my mail and mail to me at the business, and he'd send it to his partner. Well, look, Ari's doing. He's got some issue with the IRS agent, whatever it is. But Manny had this idea that and I think I'm sure a lot of employers do, that if somebody's there for that long, they must be loyal. And I'm always convinced that just because somebody's been around for a decade or two, it doesn't mean that they're loyal. It just means that many people stay for a company because it's not about loyalty. It's because they couldn't go anywhere else. I remember we replaced the head actuary with somebody else who was the greatest actuary I know, still working to this day. And we thought they were going to replace this guy. Larry was his name. And Manny's like, "Oh, this guy's been with me for 20 years. How can I get rid of him?" Easy. You do. You get rid of people who aren't very good at what their job is. And he was not a good actuary. I see, the problem sometimes with misplaced loyalty, and plan sponsors do it. Plan sponsors have, I've been using this TPA for 20 years. I just can't say no. And that's wrong, because that's, when you have loyalty to a plan provider, I think it's an absolute mistake. It's one of the most dangerous things they can do. You have a fiduciary duty. And if you're just, I like this guy, I've been around forever, that's just not really good conversation. I've had conversations with plan sponsors who stayed with the same bundle provider for 15, 20 years, not because they were getting value, because they didn't want to hurt someone's feelings. I had a plan sponsor, DB client, had an actuary. I trusted him. He didn't give you evaluation for 20, 25 years. He didn't give you backup to show that you were owed a benefit for the plan. So when the actuary told her to write a check to her business, of course the Department of Labor thought that there was some kind of embezzlement. Being a fiduciary isn't about being nice. It's about being responsible. This isn't about feelings, feelings when it comes to fiduciary work, it's overrated. This isn't about feelings. It's not personal. It's business. It's about doing what's best for the participants, and the loyalty is to the participants as a fiduciary. You don't owe a duty of loyalty to your record keeper or your buddy, the advisor. It's not loyalty to the insurance platform. Your duty and your loyalty as a plan sponsor belongs to your participants and beneficiaries, and that's it. And the beneficiaries, and that's it. Nothing else matters. And the problem is, complacency really can be a killer. And that has a lot to do with misplaced loyalty. You're loyal, so you don't do your job. You don't benchmark your fees. People always have that. Years ago I would network, and people would say, "Oh, everything's fine with my plan." They didn't really look, and I've talked the story in full circle, in full detail. Again, available on paperback on Kindle. When I was dating my wife, I think we were engaged, and I said my credit is great. My credit is fine. I don't have a credit card balance, whatever. And of course, I got my credit report, and it turns out that there was a $17,000 balance on a credit card that I opened up with my mother when I started college, and it was 15 years ago. I did not know that she held the balance on the card. I hadn't used the card since forever. I didn't even know I still had the card. And my credit wasn't perfect. It wasn't like 700 and something. It was like 680 or whatever it was, and my wife felt like I was lying because I didn't know, but that I made a statement that wasn't based in fact. And too often, plan sponsors are under the belief that their plan is in shape, and they have no basis in fact to believe that. And there are so many plans out there over the years where I've seen that the fees are just crazy. They're on an insurance-based platform, and the fees haven't been renegotiated, since the time of, fee disclosures have been in place. And that's scary because, the pricing for a plan pre-fee disclosure is a lot higher than it is now, because fee transparency didn't kill off 401k plans like all the Chicken Littles in the retirement plan business said was going to happen. What really happened is fee compression, because transparency creates competition. And of course, technological breakthroughs make it cheaper to administer a plan these days. And I think AI is certainly going to put a lot of people out of business in terms of jobs. AI would do a lot of the work a lot quicker and a lot cheaper than human beings. But you'll always need human beings to check out what AI is doing. I've seen what AI can do and what it can't do in terms of limitations. But you see too often that complacency really is a plan killer, because we've always trusted these folks to run this plan with us, and everything is fine, and we turned out it's not fine. Just because somebody's a great guy doesn't mean they're great at what they do as a plan provider. And of course, there's one problem is the myth of what I call a one-stop shop. The idea that people can handle everything, record keeping, legal, administration, investments, all that kind of stuff. It's a great idea and concept, that one-stop shop, but the problem with it is that loyalty to the one provider who's wearing all the hats and not having a system of checks and balances to make sure that they're doing the right job. Now, I, always was against the idea of the producing TPA pre-fee disclosure, because what happened I worked for producing TPA, and it was like, we're going to move your fund to a revenue sharing paying platform. We're going to get more in fees, and we're not going to tell you. And I thought that was a conflict of interest. Obviously these days with fee disclosure, everything is front and center. You know what you're getting. Revenue sharing has kind of fallen out of favor. But the fact of the matter is that even with the idea of that one-stop shop, there is no system of checks and balances. And that's why I've always offered my services as an ERISA attorney. And, loyalty backfires. And loyalty backfires when, plan sponsor realizes that the plan provider wasn't doing their, part of the bargain. And that's the problem of mistaken loyalty. There's nothing worse than feeling that you got betrayed. But you're not betrayed if you didn't think that, if you always checked up on them. You feel betrayed when you didn't do your job. And in reviewing your plan providers. When the Department of Labor comes calling, or the IRS, and we find out the compliance testing is wrong, who cares? I mean, it's just like, it is what it is. And nothing's going to change that. And your misplaced loyalty doesn't really matter. When a loyal plan provider gets contacted that they're not doing the job, all of a sudden they start ghosting people. Next is the loyalty that matters. There's only one kind of loyalty that matters in a retirement plan space, and that loyalty is to your plan participants. And again, you owe them a duty of care, prudence and diligence. You owe them transparency, reasonable fees, and quality investments. You owe them a structure that benefits them, not one that's comfortable for you. So you got to make a choice. Are you loyal to your participants, or are you loyal to your plan providers? That's an easy question. That's a softball question. The answer is you owe that loyalty to your plan participants. If you have that loyalty to your plan participants, and that's the, everything that you do is guided by that principle, you're not going to be in trouble. Next, it's a hard habit to break. Loyalty is a hard habit to break. But habits are not, some sort of defense when the DOL comes knocking. Habitual thinking is how plans end up paying way too much for way too little. It's how plans end up with investment lineups that haven't been updated in a decade. It's how lawsuit happens. You have to ask some tough questions out there, even if it's people you like and trust, even if you golf with them, even if they were part of the same fraternity or sorority. If you're a plan sponsor, you got to do a loyalty audit. List every vendor involved in your plan. Ask what value they bring. Ask what, was the last time you evaluated their work. And ask when you last benchmarked their fees. If the answers don't make you feel confident, it's really time to act. And, in the end, the 401k plan business is like any other business. It has its share of people who ghost, who rely on relationships and personal charm instead of performance. We've seen so many advisors out there that are all flash and no substance. Recently, Nevin Adams came out with a great article about how Matt Hutchinson has a $5 million, was charged with having $5 million of income because the money he stole from the plan, from the plans, not the plan that I replaced him as a fiduciary on, but the other plans. He has an income tax bill due. And that was the guy who was all flash and no substance. Everybody was, including me. Wow, he was on the front line. He's a big name in this business. And I think if you look beyond it, you realize that there was nothing there. And, there are a lot of plan providers out there that are not Matt Hutchinson, but they have a lot of flash and no substance. And I think it's important not to have loyalty to these kind of people. If you're always on their tail and always checking through, you'll find out that you're not going to get had. And, fiduciary responsibility isn't about being comfortable. It's about your job. Do your job. I think that was Bill Belichick when he was with the Patriots. And when it comes to retirement plans, the only loyalty that you have out there is to, the plan participants. And if you're always on your toes, if you're always reviewing what's going on, chances are you're going to end up being okay. So, hope you enjoyed this episode of that 401k podcast. I had a nice discussion with Mike Webb on Twitter about the length of the podcast. We always strive for 20 minutes, and sometimes we're less than 20 minutes. This is going to be one of those weeks, so Mike, enjoy those 3 or 4 minutes. Of course, go to that401ksite.com, sign up for Milwaukee, our virtual event, as well as going to Amazon.com, picking up that book. Dozens and dozens of people like the book, Full Circle, and the other books are available on Amazon.com as well. We'll have a new one out in January, so I'll probably warn you guys about that book, about 401k plan provider marketing. Just taking everything that I know about that and putting it out there. So, again, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and tune in next week for another fun-filled episode of that 401k podcast. Thanks. Bye.